Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. So I got another content idea via Facebook. So I was going through Facebook here, and I usually go through Facebook because you can learn a lot of good information, and it's a good place to kind of debate, not to argue or spar, because there's no need for that. We're all grown-ups here, but to debate, right? And I mean, everybody's gonna have their preference. I would never, and I hope my video don't come across as if I'm pushing my ideals, okay? I just present information, and hopefully you guys can pick and choose what you want from it, or just appreciate it to appreciate it. And that's fine with me, because we're all a community. We're not expected to copy and follow everything we've seen in a video, correct? And that's totally fine. We have the freedom to make those choices. However, this is very interesting. I noticed the Voron Facebook group have some elitists, I should put it, some very serious elitist problem, and it can be a problem. It makes sense sometimes why the admins have to come and step in sometimes, because we just have a lot of people who they're not really, I wouldn't call them experts, because they don't really back up their claim. They just say things and expect you to run with it, kind of thing. And I'm not that guy. I like when people present information or some research or something that you did in the background to come to that conclusion, because then that will kind of give people a visual of why that works and whatever. That's a really good thing, because it there's people like me who think like me out there, that if you say something, they're gonna want to know, okay, where did you get that information from? Or how did you come to that conclusion, or whatever. Remember, there's a lot of people who are new to this field, and we're trying to like add our own little two inputs to it, as best as we can. So, not to go on a tangent, this is going to be a video about whether to use grease or oil-based lubricants on linear rails. And I noticed that everybody has their own input. Some people say use grease, some people say use oil, right? I automatically default to oil because of my experience. And keep in mind, I'm new to this field. It's not like I've been 3D printing and I'm a professional. I'm new to this field. And my reason for using oil over grease is based on observation physically of what I do in the background. Now, sometimes I don't post these findings, but I just observe them myself, and then I go with that. And actually good timing on Simon Vez video, showing you in his latest video that he actually used oil instead of grease, right? And that was nice to see, because I'm like, thank God that someone else uses oil and not grease, especially when you're trying to print fast, right? So I posted, and I said, someone posted on the Voron forum. If you guys, any Voron guys watch my videos, if you go on Facebook, Voron Quartz Y, you'll see someone that posted a jig that he's using to put to grease the linear rails with. I think he said, not sure what grease he's using, because he didn't really say what type of grease. I'm assuming it's PTFE grease. So he created a jig to force the oil in between the channel here. Instead of using the little hole, which is nothing wrong, he created a nice little jig that can force the oil, the grease in the little open grooves you see back here. If you guys want to look, the little open grooves here, right? So, so I said, oil is better to use than grease. Grease creates friction, oil doesn't. Nice jig though. Who told me to say that? So there was a bunch of reply, most of them for grease. it seems. But the way it's presented, it's almost like oil is not a choice, essentially. It'd be different if it was presented in a way that says, okay, you know, in certain application, which one of the person said in certain application, you know, oil is a choice, but in this application, grease is better to use. I don't believe that grease is better to use in this application. Maybe if you're like doing with something heavy duty, like for example, I can see oil being used for like CNC, grease being used for like CNC milling, like something like that, where you're working with oil, water spraying up on stuff, and the oil will prevent rust and even, sorry, not the oil, I keep saying oil, but the grease will prevent rust and stuff and still keep parts lubricated. You have stronger motors and stuff like that. Yes, then I can see grease in that application being a better method, because you know it's not like you have the CNC Toolhead just sitting back and forth like a 3D printer. It doesn't do that, right? It has a lot of torque, a lot of power to drill and mill things, and it's not moving in a very fast motion. So in that case, it's not like we're putting an input shaper on a CNC mill. Like, that makes sense to me. And again, this is my deduction here. I might be wrong, but it makes sense to use CNC mill, to use grease in a CNC mill, and that type of heavy industrial application to me. But when it comes to 3D printers and linear rails, in my opinion, oil is better. And the reason why is because, again, every little thing, what I noticed, any little thing in this channel, in these little grooves, in that little small channel here, these wheels pick up. These small bearings pick up any little thing. It's why we clean them with alcohol, right? It's why we clean the groove, try to get it nice and clean, so that way when we put it back on with, you know, some people use grease, I use oil, but when we put it back on, the channel is nice and smooth. There's no itching. Sometimes when I get these things, you can move it and feel a little itching, like it just itches in certain places, and that just means there's particles, there's like deposit built up. Even though some of them ship with pre-oiled, not grease, they ship with oiled, like whatever oil they use, and I guess that oil is just to prevent rust during transportation. But if you notice, most of them are shipped with oil, not grease, and I'm guessing they're assuming that you use grease yourself or oil it up yourself, but most of them are shipped with oil. But I noticed when there's particles in buildup, this itches and you can feel a very like pulling effect. It's very strange. But when I clean it and oil it up, not grease it up, oil it up with I use the super lube multi synthetic oil, all purpose. When I do that, it's super smooth after that. There's no itching. I can just glide it, and then the wheels. You see all the wheels moving? All the not the wheels. Sorry, bearings. You see the bearings moving? They all move. Right? So the argument is, I guess, when you use grease, it should create friction for all the wheels, all the bearings to move across it. I guess if you use oil, in some cases, the bearings don't roll at all. Like they don't get in contact with the actual path, and you need that. But in this case, this is oil. There's oil on here, and all the bearings are moving. So again, maybe it depends on the type of oil, and we gotta admit that there's different type of grease, different type of oil lubricants, right? All for specific application. But again, to back up my claim, why I say use oil, I'm gonna pull up an article. Remember, they didn't back up their claim; they're just telling me what they think. So again, this is also an open discussion. I invite any one of you guys, you know, that love my channel, like the stuff I deduce, to come in and put your comment in too, because I like reading other people's opinion, and I like reading professional opinion. Honestly, people who are professional in this space that know way more than I do, please put it down there. If grease is the best thing to do, or different type of grease is the best thing to use, please post a link and let me see it. I'm all about it. I'm all willing to learn. We're all sharing this information. But here's why I thought oil was good, and an article kind of backed up what I thought initially, at least. It says, all metal and metal recirculating bearings require lubrication in order to function properly and provide a reasonable bearing life. Lubrication reduces friction and heat by separating the rolling elements from bearing raceway. Key word here. This is what we're looking for. This is why my deduction was to use oil. Lubrication reduces friction. You know what someone commented on Facebook? Friction is good. Yes, friction is good in some cases. But remember, our 3D printers are sensitive when it comes to how it's built when it comes to how pulleys are, for example, all these 3D printers are very sensitive to pulley tolerance, belt tolerance, linear rail tolerance. It's all sensitive because notice when you start printing fast, what happens? Let's take input shaper out the way with clipper. When you print fast, what happens? You get a lot of vibration and ringing. And it's not just motor resonance only. It's also how all of this is assembled. I noticed that when I had, this is all from observation and just paying attention to things. When I had my linear guides, that are the linear guides are what the Transy X5 SA Pro come with, that weird guide thing with the metal wheels. I noticed that when they come, the way they come from the manufacturer of Transy, they're so tight. Again, friction. It's tight, so friction. It will pick up every imperfection on that and the metal. And it's not just it's not just materials that built up on the metal, but the finish, the way, the tolerance on the metal itself. It will pick up every undulation. So when I print fast, you can see little weird, again, artifacts and just weird undulation on it. So I'm like, that's so weird. No matter how much I print fast, you would see it. Running input shaper still didn't help the cause. But you know what happened? When I took the wheels and adjust the wheel alignment and let it barely catches the metal, I noticed from feeling the weird undulation in the metal to like smooth. It wasn't, you don't feel this weird imperfection in the metal. It was very smooth, and that automatically, when I ran input shaper again, it improved my print, right? So it goes to show it's just not the motors alone that are causing the VFA or resonant effect, but it's also the tolerance of these linear guides that are causing it as well. So based on that, I'm saying, okay, well, back to what I'm saying. If you use grease, and depending on the type of grease you use, it can create weird friction. It can create a bit of a friction that is unnecessary when it comes to 3D printers, right? It's to me, it's unnecessary. You do want some friction, but you don't want enough to where it's picking up imperfection in the channel raceways and then presenting it in your print, right? So to me, oil is just better because again, it not only is the carriage a bit freer when it moves, but the wheels, all the bearings still are moving on the track, right? Now you can argue that oil will evaporate, oil-based solution may evaporate over time, and that's fine. But someone mentioned, hey, it will evaporate in 2 days. That's exaggerating because let's be honest, oil don't evaporate that fast. It doesn't. You know, you can oil something and it can come a whole month or two and still have oil in there, right? So, and it's not like our chambers are getting up to 120 degrees, that type of thing. Our chamber don't even pass. Some people chamber, like in terms of the 3D printers, don't pass 40, 50, or 60. Mine hit 60. And I haven't oiled it for months. Ever since I built the Trident, I haven't put oil on it. Same thing with the Ironman V1.8, I haven't oiled it, and it's working fine. So the problem is that opinion is okay, but make sure your opinion is at least based off the factual information and not what you think, may be, right? Because the things that even though I observe this stuff, I also want to back up my information with some kind of research, and then this article kind of backed that up. So let's go back to where it says basic grease and oil. It says recirculating linear bearings can use either grease or oil. Again, you can use both. The way the Facebook on the Facebook, it seems that there are more biased towards grease. It says the choice between the two often comes down to a few application criteria together with ease of maintenance requirements. For example, low speed application typically require grease because it provides better protection when the bearing operate in the condition of boundary and mixed lubrication, right? Then it says both of which dominates at low speeds. So again, to me, it makes sense to use grease in, like, again, CNC milling where the head don't move that fast. In CNC milling, the head is taking on load and pressure, so you need torque to cut the stuff, right? But in terms of movement, it doesn't need to be that fast. So grease makes sense, especially when you're splashing up coolant, any type of coolant to not rust the area. Grease makes sense. It says Conversely, oil is often better choice for high speed application due to its cooling effect. To me, that makes sense for 3D printers, especially if you're printing really fast, like Vez and his crazy VZ Butt. On my VZ Butt that pushes about 12K acceleration, that makes sense to use oil because you want less friction on the you want it to move as freely as possible and as free as possible with less friction on the bearings itself, because again, that's going to show up in your print as well. So to me, that's where my deduction was coming from. Not that you can't use grease, but I was just really suggesting, hey, oil might be a better factor when using 3D printers. When using in a 3D printer environment, especially. That's all I was saying. So I'm not telling you to not use grease. You can definitely use grease. I'm just using some deductive reasoning based on my observation of why oil might be a better fit for 3D printing application. That's all I was suggesting. And everybody was telling me grease. So so it says also orientation also factors in the grease versus oil decision. For vertical or inclined application, grease is typically preferred. Makes sense, because if I'm looking at my 3D printer, what's vertical? The bed goes up vertical, right? And the lead screws are vertical. So in that case, it makes sense to use grease, because if you use oil, the oil is going to run right down, right? It's going to eventually move from the top to the bottom, because that's what oil does. But it makes sense to use grease on lead screws because it stays in place, right? It kind of lubricates the whole lead screw, and it doesn't move up and down, right? And it doesn't drain either. It just stays stationary. Makes sense. But in ore application, the gantry is horizontal. The linear rails are mounted horizontally, so you don't have to worry about oil draining. The oil is usually stationary. There's no weird undulation of the gantry. It stays fixed in a horizontal position. So in that case, using oil won't affect it. It won't evaporate. It won't dry up or nothing like that. It will stay until it evaporate over time of a bunch of heat cycles. So to me, the argument to say that oil evaporate faster and you have to put in oil every 2 days, it's just arguing. It's an argument for grease, and that's fine. But it's also biased, because you can present both information. I'm presenting both. I'm not talking against grease. You definitely can use grease, especially if there's a type of grease that acts and behaves like an oil-based grease. Then that's fine. That works just as good, as long as it's not creating too much friction for ore application to use. So that's really where I was coming from, and I wish the comments were more educational. So instead of just laughing at my comment, which I don't care if you laugh with your emoji, that's fine. But instead of correcting, they weren't presenting facts. They were just presenting their opinion and their idea. Now, if they were presenting facts and information, or saying, hey, listen, I'm a professional, I've been in the field, blah, 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 then I probably could have read it and say, you know what, that probably makes sense, and I research it. But it seems like their elitism and opinion are not backed up. And I like when people back up their opinion with some kind of factual information for me to say, oh, wow, it's true, right? So that's where I was coming from with it. Again, this is an open channel, open discussion here. Post your comments, your opinions. I want to read it. I want to see it. And if you guys have any other alternative other than just oil based lubricant, if you have grease based lubricant that behaves similar to oil, post that too. I would like to take a look into that. Like I said, I'm not speaking against oil or speaking just for I'm not speaking against grease and speaking just for oil. I'm just saying both can be used. And in our application, the less friction we have on these on our printer, the better it performs. The less VFA and artifacting we'll have, because we have less friction. It's going to glide much smoothly because you're printing a physical object, right? Versus when you're CNC milling something, it makes sense to use grease, man, because you're cutting. And those little small undulations you might have not gonna affect a big, heavy, sturdy machine. It won't affect that, right? So again, ore application is more sensitive. A CNC application is not is less sensitive. So oil based, using on that for the rails or whatever, that makes total sense. When you're using big, heavy machinery that require grease, that makes total sense. But in our machinery where we're trying to get the toolhead as light as possible, as compact as possible, make everything glide as smooth as possible. The tolerance is more sensitive. It makes sense to use oil-based lubricant because, again, we want everything to move smoothly and not so frictiony and cause a lot of problems. At least that's my deduction. But if I'm wrong, guys, correct me. I'm open to I'm open to correction. But yeah, but I'm done now. Done yapping. So I'm curious to see what you guys commented on this video, and I'm willing to learn. So just post what you think, your observation. Post if you agree with me or not, and then post some article or whatever grease you may use or oil that you have used in your experience that have worked. So yeah, guys. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.